Our next storyteller, welcome to the stage, Mike Murphy. Hello.
Hey, Philadelphia. All right, all right. I want to tell a story, and I want to tell a story about the time I was a poll watcher in 2008 for the Obama campaign. So here it goes. I am not a native Philadelphian. I grew up in Metro Detroit. I grew up on 13 Mile Road. Oh, there we go. Detroit, stand up. Although I wasn't actually from Detroit, I was from 13 Mile Road. And 13 Mile Road is 5 very long miles from 8 Mile Road. So I grew up in the suburbs, and I moved to Philadelphia. I lived in Fairmount. And I was there for about a year, and my wife and I volunteered for the Obama campaign to be a poll watcher. Now, a poll watcher is somebody from the campaign who goes to the polls, and you make sure everything's okay at the polls. You make sure the poll machines work, that sort of thing. You stand in the polling place and make sure everything's okay. So we got our poll watching assignments for the election in 2008 in November. My wife's polling place was in Rittenhouse Square. She was like, this is great. I'm going to go get some coffee, and I'm going to be able to have a great time. And mine was in Southwest Philly, in very, very, very far away from our house in Southwest Philly. So in the morning, I'm pretty new to Philadelphia, but I knew well enough to know that that's just not an area of Philadelphia that I usually go to. So I get up in the morning, and I get a taxi cab. Now, this is 2008. This is before Uber. So I get an actual taxi cab. We did not have a car. And I get down to the polling place, and on the drive down, the cab driver says, look, just so you know, I'm not waiting for you. Like, I'm going to drop you off. And I said, why? And he said, well, I'm not going to wait for you. I was like, oh, no, I'm not going there to buy drugs. I'm going there to volunteer for a campaign. And I'm going, so I'm like, yeah, drop me off at this place, at this field house. And he's like, okay, here's the field house. The field house was more of like a concrete shack. It wasn't really like, but it was on a field, and there was a line of people outside, 7:30 in the morning. I get out there, I meet the judge of elections, and I say, hey, I'm here from the Obama campaign, I'm here to be a poll watcher. Let's do this. So we get there, a line of people grows and grows and grows. And he says, yeah, I've never really seen it like this. We usually get a pretty good voter turnout, but I feel like the entire neighborhood's here. The entire neighborhood was there. I spent all day there inside the polling place. There was a 93-year-old woman who showed up to vote that day. She hadn't voted in 20 years. And she came in, and she didn't know how to use the voting machines because they didn't have them when she voted last time. And she said, hey, can you help me use the voting machine? I was like, well, I can't help you use the voting machine. That would be wrong, but I can kind of tell you what's going on in there. And she's like, well, I was like, you hit this button. She's like, okay. She's like, what about this thing? I said, oh, that's the water millage. She's like, what does that mean? I said, well, the city wants to borrow money so that it can improve the water system. But then, when you borrow money, you got to pay it back with interest. And she said, oh. I said, so short term, it's a good idea to improve the water system. But long term, you're going to end up paying more money in taxes. And she said, I'll never forget this. She said, listen, I'm 93, so all I really have is the short term. So I'm going to vote to borrow the money. The polling place we were at was not ADA compliant, and somebody showed up in a wheelchair, so we carried them in for them to vote and carried them back out for them to vote. And during this time, I got to know the other volunteers. And, we realized, we're like, wow, this is a really great example of a community showing up and voting. And they had food. They had people come up and play songs. It was a great time. But, obviously, this was not Fairmount. This was not Rittenhouse Square. This was a very different part of town. And at one point, one of the volunteers looked around and said, oh, I just went across the street to the bodega, but it closes at dark. This is crazy. Who would ever want to live here? And I said, well, everybody we've met today lives here. So a lot of people want to live here. That night, the sun went down, and the judge of elections pulled his car around and turned the headlights on. And I said, why are you doing that? He said, well, the light broke. It doesn't work. So we need, light. Voting closes. 93% of the people that were registered to vote in that area showed up and voted. Very heavily. Judge of elections gave me a ride back home. And as he's driving me home, I said, thanks for driving me right back home. He's like, yeah, a taxi cab wouldn't pick you up here anyway. And I said, okay. And I said, well, thanks very much. He's like, look, yeah, we're all from the same city. That night, I'm in Rittenhouse Square watching the election results with my wife and her friends. And, we're celebrating. We're like, we did it. And I said, man, did we? I guess we did. I hope there's a change in the neighborhood. I moved 10 blocks from that neighborhood. I live in West Philly now. And I've gone by there before a few times, walking my dog. And they fixed the light. There's a light outside that field house now. That's my story.